Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Alberta has a new Chief Medical Officer of Health as Dr. Dina Hinshaw is relieved of her duties. A Lethbridge police sergeant has been fired. We will explain why Sergeant Jason Moulton is no longer a member of the LPS. And CSIS said the Freedom Convoy posed no national security threat before the Emergencies Act was invoked. Political reporter Brian Lilly has the details.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. The public inquiry into the Emergencies Act continues in our nation's capital. Lawyer Eva Chipiuk with the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms is there representing some of those who participated in the Freedom Convoy in Ottawa last February. Eva joins us now from Ottawa. Now, the inquiry continues for a few more weeks. Eva, what did we hear about today?
So we've now gotten into the federal evidence, starting yesterday with the public safety and global affairs. And today we're for the first time hearing from the RCMP featuring Brenda Lucki. So we're getting into the federal level finally this week.
Yes, what did RCMP Police Commissioner Brenda Lucki have to say?
You know, it's been a little bit disappointing on a national scale. I honestly do have to say, we're talking about the top dog for policing in Canada, and just the demeanor and the ability to deliver and provide information is showing. When we compare that to the OPP commissioner, it's night and day different. So Brenda Lucki had a lot of uncertainties, qualified a lot of her answers, did remember a lot of the answers. What we do know is that she didn't talk to the protesters, even though nonchalantly she said she could have. She said that resources were an issue. On a federal level, I'm not very impressed.
Thanks so much, Eva. That was Eva Chipiuk, lawyer with the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms, who's in our nation's capital representing some of the protesters with the Ottawa Freedom Convoy. Now, Canada's Security Intelligence Service, or CSIS, has said that the Freedom Convoy last February posed no national security threat just before the Emergencies Act was invoked. That's according to political commentator and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilly.
If CSIS says there's no national security threat, that should tell you that they went too far in invoking the law. But Rob Stewart, who was then deputy minister in the Public Safety Department, the most powerful bureaucrat under Marco Mendicino, he said, well, yes, but they were getting other information from people who didn't use that test, and Cabinet decided that it was justified in invoking the Act. That doesn't matter how Cabinet feels. The law is specific. Has to be a national security threat as defined by Section 2 of the CSIS Act.
Brian Lilly will also discuss why, if an election was held today, it would be good news for Pierre Poilievre's Conservatives. He'll have details coming up later in our broadcast. The federal NDP has joined Preston Manning, saying that a federal inquiry needs to be launched to investigate the Trudeau government's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. Party officials say it's time to have a proper, comprehensive, full examination of the federal preparedness and response. The only way to do that is by calling an official inquiry.
People deserve to know why certain decisions were taken, what mistakes were made, and if their government acted appropriately. Throughout the pandemic, New Democrats and many experts and stakeholders identified the eventual need for a fully independent, comprehensive, and penetrating review of Canada's COVID-19 preparedness and response. With the emergency pandemic conditions behind us, now is the time to act to ensure transparency and accountability from government, and to make sure that lessons are learned for any future pandemic or other emergency.
Preston Manning, the former Reform Party leader, earlier this month launched a citizen-led inquiry demanding that the Liberals be investigated for their handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so far over 26,000 Canadians have signed the online petition demanding that inquiry. The first cases of COVID-19 were detected in Canada at the end of January of 2020, and the World Health Organization declared a global pandemic 2 months later. Dr. Dina Hinshaw is out as the Alberta Chief Medical Officer of Health. The Alberta government said that Dr. Mark Joffe, the Vice President and Medical Director for Cancer Care Alberta, will be taking over on an interim basis. Hinshaw became a familiar figure during the COVID-19 pandemic, delivering regular updates on the spread of the virus and measures taken to contain it. Premier Danielle Smith has made it clear she blames both Hinshaw and Alberta Health Services for failing to deliver the best advice and care for Albertans, as the hospital system came close to buckling in successive waves of the pandemic. Alberta Deputy Premier and Lethbridge East MLA Nathan Neudorf says it may have been time for a change in direction when it came to who would be Alberta's Chief Medical Officer of Health.
Our Premier, that along with many files, is looking to set a new direction and work on a couple of challenges. We all know that our healthcare system is under extreme pressure. The old question and answers aren't working. So she's developing a suite of plans to help address that so that we get our citizens the best care possible. And that starts at the top. So I think this is one of a number of steps that you'll see in the coming weeks as she helps our government make sure that we start delivering on those healthcare commitments.
NDP health critic David Shepherd says Alberta's healthcare system is in peril right now. He says you can really see it as wait times continue to grow at our hospitals, as flu rates and other viruses continue to soar.
Indeed, we're seeing emergency rooms with estimated wait times of more than half a day. The South Health campus in Calgary reported potential waits in excess of 14 hours overnight. And we're hearing from frontline workers in Red Deer that portions of that city's emergency room were closed yesterday due to staff shortages. Staff at that hospital have reportedly been told to call other rural hospitals to find beds for patients in need. The situation in children's health care is devastating. Staff at Alberta's Children's Hospital report that at one point yesterday there were more than 130 patients waiting to be seen in its emergency room.
Alberta Premier Danielle Smith says she will not mandate masks in schools. Smith says anyone who wants to wear a mask is free to do so. She says her focus right now is getting access to more supplies of scarce medicine, including children's Tylenol, and reducing long wait times in emergency rooms. Alberta schools are seeing high rates of absenteeism due to a wave of illnesses. Meanwhile, in Saskatchewan, Health Minister Paul Merriman says he has not discussed a mask mandate with his province's Chief Medical Officer of Health, but does not think the province really needs one. A Lethbridge police officer has been fired over his role in a meme-gate scandal that targeted executive members, other officers, and government officials with hateful and degrading messages. Jason Moulton, a former sergeant with the Lethbridge Police Service, created a chat called Meme Militia back in 2018, which shared a wide range of inappropriate messages. None of the jokes created have been shared publicly, but Moulton pleaded guilty to 2 counts of discreditable conduct, 2 counts of neglect of duty, and a count of insubordination after a disciplinary hearing. Since the meme gate was discovered, 5 officers, a sergeant, and 4 constables were charged with misconduct under the Alberta Police Act and Police Service Regulation following an investigation by an outside agency. Now, in a release, Lethbridge Police Chief Shahimi Dizadeh had this to say: "The Lethbridge Police Service is disheartened by the actions of these 5 officers and the dishonor, embarrassment, and erosion of the public's trust they caused, also the harm to our employees and others who are among those targeted in the memes. I am deeply sad and sorry the actions of a few have impacted so many. Their behavior does not reflect the values of our police service and our commitment to the community." Sergeant Jason Moulton has 30 days to appeal to the Law Enforcement Review Board. Well, it's a fairly mild day across much of southwestern Alberta, but some snow may be on the way. Jeanette Rocher is in now with an early peek at the forecast. Jeanette, when can we expect maybe more of the white stuff to arrive?
Well, as early as Wednesday, Hal, a 60% chance of flurries is expected, along with a 20 to 40 kilometer per hour wind gusts from the northwest. Those wind speeds sticking around into this evening, making that overnight low of -8 feel more like -15 with the wind chill. Into the morning, we're going to be seeing wind chill factors in place as well, making the morning feel like -14, and by the afternoon, -7. But our daytime high, -1, of course, with those flurries. It will warm up later on in the week, but not before it gets a bit chillier. I'll be back later in the show to give you all those details.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeanette. There are reports of rising anti-Semitism. Now, that includes recent comments made by rapper Ye, formerly known as Kanye West. As BCN's Micah Quinn explains now, a Lethbridge rabbi echoed the sentiments that anti-Semitism is in fact on the rise across North America, including here in the Windy City. Rabbi Sidney Speakman explains how much it's really gone up in our area.
Have risen by about 750%.
Rabbi Sidney Speakman founded the Joyful House of Prayer based out of Lethbridge in 2009. He says he has even faced hate speech before, as he was attacked just outside of his temple a few years ago.
Locally, 5 years ago, I was not pleased with the police response. But in the last couple of years, we've had a couple of incidences and the response was quick.
Kanye West, who is now known as Ye, recently made some anti-Semitic remarks on an episode of the podcast Drink Champs.
The Jewish people have their hand on every single business that controls the world. And everybody knows that faux fact. We can't be mad at them, and you can't call me anti-Semitic for calling out. You can't call me anti-Semitic for saying I'm going DEFCON 3.
I think what you said though is important though.
That sounds pretty anti-Semitic, except for the fact that I am Jew.
Ye was also seen wearing a White Lives Matter shirt alongside conservative political commentator and author Candace Owens. The rapper was dropped by Adidas following his remarks on the White Lives Matter movement alongside his anti-Semitic comments. Drew Kerr, the president of Four Corners Communications, says that the termination of the deal is a huge blow to both parties.
You've got what the brand stands for, what their code is, and what they mean to their consumers and buyers versus the bottom line, which is the fact that the deal that they've had since, I would say that 2013, 2014 with Ye has been an incredibly lucrative deal. And so there is, I'm sure, that tug of war going on. This is not just necessarily a punishment. This is a severing of ties.
For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
The Lethbridge Senior Centre is hosting a fundraising campaign for those who are in dire need here in our city. The Sockatoom campaign was started as a way to collect socks and give them to community groups such as the YWCA Harbour House, Streets Alive Mission, the Homeless Shelter, and Lethbridge. The socks are then distributed to our most vulnerable. Gail Petrie, an organizer for the campaign, says she started this initiative over 20 years ago.
We started in 2000. I worked at an elementary school, and I noticed kids coming to school not properly dressed, with no boots or shoes, and especially socks, bare feet. My staff and I were having coffee, and I said, we should start collecting socks for some of these poor kids. So let's just sock it to them. So far, we've collected 118,000 pairs of socks.
That's a lot of socks. December 15th is the last day to collect the socks, and at that time, seniors and kids from schools in Lethbridge will come together and build a sock mountain before they're distributed to those most in need. Lethbridge has been crowned the winner for the best tasting water. Out of 9 competing cities at the 2022 American Water Works Association Western Canada Conference, Lethbridge was chosen as the winner, with Jasper and St. Albert coming in as runner-ups. Now, an official with the city explains the secret behind our best tasting water.
Like it's purely a subjective competition. They have a panel of people that are tasting and sniffing the entries, and so there's some of the things they're looking for is whether there's an aftertaste, a chemical aftertaste, or whether there's an odor that might impact the customer's experience.
The city says tests on water are collected multiple times a day, up to about 32,000 tests on treated water each and every year. SaskTel is expanding a rural fibre initiative to bring better internet to more than 70 towns and villages. The province says the Crown Corporation is expected to spend an additional $100 million to expand the service in order to narrow the digital divide in Saskatchewan. Originally announced 2 years ago, the program is to bring the fibre optic broadband network to more than 110,000 residents in more than 130 rural communities. All communities are expected to have the service by the end of March 2025. Government officials in Manitoba say more than 650 new childcare spaces will be created in 9 communities which have the greatest childcare needs. It's part of an agreement between Manitoba and Ottawa to allocate up to $70 million to create more than 1,200 nonprofit childcare spaces with a focus on rural and First Nations communities. Premier Heather Stephenson says the prefabricated buildings are expected to be moved to community sites this winter and are anticipated to be fully open by next summer. A 17-year-old Toronto student is in hospital with life-threatening injuries after being stabbed inside of his school at the city's East End on Monday. Police responded to the incident at Birchmount Park Collegiate just after 3 p.m. local time.
So when something like this happens just before dismissal, it can be chaotic. We understand that, but I want to really reach out and say thank you to the Toronto Police and other first responders who came so quickly this afternoon, and the staff that also assisted in making sure that this student was as best as could be until paramedics and first responders could arrive.
This is the second stabbing at this school in just a matter of months. What can be done to prevent this from happening again?
I do think we need help from other levels of government and community partners. This is not something that the TDSB can do alone, so that's something that we have to work with others to see if we can not only work to prevent this, but also, are there root causes that we can help and play a role in helping others to make sure that this isn't the answer to a problem that a student may or may not have.
School officials say social workers were available to both students and staff as the school reopened today. Toronto Police say they are not releasing information about possible suspects as it is an ongoing investigation. Well, Christmas is just around the corner. Many across Canada and the U.S. have begun their Christmas shopping as we lead up to Black Friday on November the 25th. An Etsy trend expert says it appears as though shoppers are looking for a little more color in their lives this holiday season.
Okay, so this holiday season, there's a few things that are on top of mind for shoppers. The first thing is all about merry and bright. We're coming off the heels of people really starting to incorporate bright colors into their homes. So now they want to do that dopamine shopping for everyone on their list. So Kitchen Kitsch, I really love this because it's a very fun trend. Again, it ties nicely to merry and bright because it's about bright, vibrant colors, but really finding inspiration from kitchen themes of the 50s and 60s. So you'll see a lot of those types of mixers and coffee cups and all of that printed on tea towels, and really finding inspiration from those 2 decades. And then magical rituals, which I also really love because it's a personal favorite of mine. But I think because we've been through so much in the last couple of years, people are really going inside and trying to figure out where can they find inspiration and make themselves even better, and that self-expression, right?
A little color is always good, absolutely. You know, it may begin to feel a little bit like Christmas again this week as more snow is on the way for Lethbridge. A full look at the weather picture is coming up. You know, it's nice to enjoy some milder temperatures across much of southwestern Alberta again today. Jeanette Rocher is in now with a full look at the forecast. Jeanette, it may be mild, but there's a potential of more snow on the horizon.
Yeah, more snow and more chilly temperatures as well. The good news is, though, those chillier temperatures are still going to be within our seasonal range, not including the wind chill factor, of course. Into Wednesday, looking at a 60% chance of flurries with a high of -1. -7 the high on Thursday. There's that chilly day. Lots of sunshine, though, and then up to the plus temperatures for the weekend. Friday, high of 2 degrees into Saturday as well, all the way up to 7 on Sunday, and then 5 degrees on Monday. Not bad at all, considering the average high for this time of year, 4 degrees, average low -7. 19 was our high temperature on this day back in 1995. And in 1959 was the chilliest, which was -26. The sun rose this morning at 7:43 a.m., sunset this afternoon, 4:49 p.m., giving us 9 hours and 6 minutes of daylight. Okay, on the west coast tomorrow, looking at a high of 10 degrees, some fog dissipating in the morning for both Victoria and Vancouver, but mainly sunny skies. 8 degrees the high in Vancouver tomorrow, -3 the high in Edmonton with a 30% chance of flurries, and a 60% chance of flurries expected in Calgary tomorrow with a high of 0. Those afternoons, though, in Calgary and Edmonton looking at dropping quite a bit without that wind chill factor. Saskatoon also expecting some light snow, -4 the high there. -4, same thing in Regina with light snow expected. -7 expected tomorrow the high, with also periods of snow as we look to to the central part of the country. Toronto looking at 2 centimeters of snow, then changing to rain in the afternoon. 3 degrees the high there, 0 the high in Ottawa tomorrow, and a high of 2 degrees in Montreal. As we look to Atlantic Canada, we're seeing precipitation in the form of snow and rain. Fredericton could see those flurries with a high of 0. Halifax actually looking at chance of rain, looking at 5 to 10 millimeters of rain, 7 the high there. Charlottetown looking at snow mixed with rain, high of 5 degrees and 1 degree. Temperature staying steady all day long in St. John's, Newfoundland with mainly cloudy skies. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
Today's weather report is brought to you by Ridge Utilities, providing competitive rates for electricity, natural gas, and internet, while investing back in communities across southern Alberta.
Federal Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault says a cap on greenhouse gas emissions from Canada's oil and gas sector will be ready by the end of 2023. Guilbeault, who's at the UN climate talks in Egypt, says Ottawa is developing the regulations in record time. He says emissions from oil and gas production account for around 25% of Canada's total carbon footprint and are 83% higher than they were 30 years ago. The final regulations are now expected to come around 2 years after the Liberals first promised the cap in their 2021 election campaign platform. The Canadian Real Estate Association says home sales in October edged up 1.3% from September. It was the first monthly gain since February. Analysts, however, say overall sales were still down 36% compared to 2021. They say sales activity last month remained below the low end of pre-COVID norms. It was also the quietest October for unit volumes since the economy was climbing out of a recession back in 2010. Many attributed the slowdown to rising interest and mortgage rates. It appears as though a number of Medicine Hat business owners were able to survive during the COVID-19 pandemic. Lisa Kowalchuk is the executive director of the Medicine Hat Chamber of Commerce, and she says a big reason why was the entrepreneurial spirit of so many business owners in southeastern Alberta.
Despite some of the challenges, we still saw a number of business start up during a very difficult time, taking that risk and that challenge and, surviving through and becoming very successful. So it's really neat to see, again, the strength and resiliency of our business community and those connections and the deeper connections, I think, that have been formed and continue to grow within our community. So it's a really strong presence of our entrepreneurs and that entrepreneurial mindset that we have, in particular, I think, across Alberta, and we see it in southern Alberta in particular, the willingness to take risks, and certainly even those that have expanded their businesses.
Make sure you catch the full interview with Lisa Kowalchuk from the Medicine Hat Chamber of Commerce and BCM producer Michael Clausen coming up after Business News. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 72 points on the day to finish at 19,994. The Dow was up 56 points to 33,592. The S&P 500 was up 34 on the day to 3991. And the Nasdaq was up 162 points to 11,358. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up $1.05 to $86.92 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 10 cents to $6.03 US. Gold was up 7 cents to $17.79 US an ounce. And silver was even on the day at $21.57 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $13.06 per bushel. Barley's at $9.90. Canola's at $20.32, and corn is at $10.72 per bushel. Live cattle were down 30 cents to $151.28. Feeder cattle January contract was down $1.28 to $175.68, and lean hogs were up 45 cents to $85.33. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to $75.32 US. Recapping one of our top stories, Dr. Dina Henshaw is out as the Alberta Chief Medical Officer of Health. The Alberta government said that Dr. Mark Joffe, the Vice President and Medical Director for Cancer Care Alberta, will be taking her place on an interim basis. Premier Danielle Smith has made it clear she blames both Henshaw and Alberta Health Services for failing to deliver the best advice and care for Albertans as the hospital system came close to buckling in successive waves of the COVID-19 pandemic. Canada's Security Intelligence Service, or CSIS, says the Freedom Convoy posed no threat to national security just before the Emergencies Act was invoked. Political reporter Brian Lilly will have more details for us in just a moment. And listen, if you see news happening in your community, be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. We'd love to hear from you.
Here's today's Bridge City News community calendar. Find unique gifts at the Indigenous Artisans Christmas Market on Saturday, November 19th at the Lethbridge Public Library's main branch from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Discover handcrafted items, jewelry, home decor, and so much more. Plus, enter to win door prizes with every purchase. Admission is free. For more information, visit lethlib.ca. The Interfaith Food Bank is looking for volunteers to help in administration, their warehouse, and kitchen. The commitment is 3 to 4 hours, once or twice a week. Through your help, you'll be providing food security in our community and enjoy a sense of purpose by serving others. For details on volunteering, contact Bill at volunteer@interfaithfoodbank.ca or by calling 403-320-8779. And that's today's Bridge City News community calendar.
On Monday, there was a moment at the public inquiry into the Emergencies Act where we found out that CSIS advised the government that there was no national security threat as defined by law during the Freedom Convoy last February. Now, to talk about this in more detail is political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilly joins us once again from Toronto. Brian, why is this so important?
It's so important, Hal, because it's key to whether or not the government was justified in invoking the Emergencies Act. The law spells out that this is not a normal law, that the Emergencies Act can't be invoked at the drop of a hat. There have to be certain conditions met. One of them is that it has to deal with an emergency that no other law in Canada can handle. After you clear that hurdle, you have to say, okay, is there a threat to national security? Because there's two different types of emergencies that can be invoked. The one that the Trudeau government invoked to deal with the convoy was a public order emergency. To invoke that, there has to be a threat to national security as defined by Section 2 of the Canadian Intelligence Security Services Act, CSIS. So, you know, it's not just, well, we feel like there's a problem. There is a legal definition of what constitutes a national security threat. Section 2 of the National CSIS Act says things like espionage or sabotage. David Viano, the director of CSIS, in his witness testimony, he was not appearing. This is his witness statement. He'll be appearing later. Said that there was no sabotage or espionage to constitute a national security threat. Were people trying to overthrow the government using violent means? No, they weren't. Sure, everyone talks about this memorandum of understanding, trying to claim that the Senate and the Governor General will replace the cabinet. Well, that's not the same thing as trying to overthrow the government. Sorry, there was no seditious movement. Is there foreign interference, foreign influence? Well, some people have said, well, yes, there were those American donations. That's proof. And I've been saying since they invoked the Emergencies Act that they were going to hang their hat on the foreign funding. But David Viano of CSIS, in his report to Cabinet, which went to them on December 13th, said, no, this does not constitute a foreign threat. And, you know, it has to be a foreign state actor involved. There has to be some real threat, and there simply isn't. So if CSIS says there's no national security threat, that should tell you that they went too far in invoking the law. But Rob Stewart, who was then deputy minister in the Public Safety Department, the most powerful bureaucrat under Marco Mendicino, he said, well, yes, but they were getting other information from people who didn't use that test, and Cabinet decided that it was justified in invoking the act. That doesn't matter how Cabinet feels. The law is specific. It has to be a national security threat as defined by Section 2 of the CSIS Act.
So, Brian, CSIS says there's no national security threat during the Freedom Convoy. Now, we've also seen the email where Police Commissioner Brenda Leckie said there were more tools that they hadn't used, and the discovery that the Trudeau government shut down attempts by bureaucrats to meet with protesters. Do you get the sense that maybe the rationale for invoking the act has simply fallen apart?
I've been feeling that way since about the first week, maybe the first week and a half of testimony. You know, you have to sit there and listen and see. you don't know what you don't know, as the saying goes. And so we didn't know what we were going to hear at the Emergencies Act inquiry. Maybe there would be evidence that had never come forward before to say, yes, this was absolutely justified. But this CSIS threat assessment, saying there was no threat to national security, that doesn't mean the convoy wasn't a pain in the butt. Doesn't mean that police weren't right to clear the streets after 3 weeks. Doesn't mean any of that. There is just a specific legal definition, and CISA said it's not there. The RCMP commissioner says we have more tools, and in fact, this morning she was talking about that in her own testimony, that there were more tools available. All of this, and then the testimony the other day about how ministers stepped in and told their officials, no, you will not meet with them. That tells you that there was no serious attempt to do anything but move towards the Emergencies Act. And according to some testimony, there were discussions of invoking the Emergencies Act as early as February 4th, which is the start of the second weekend, I believe, going by memory here. I don't have the calendar up in front of me. But by February 4th, Minister Blair was talking about using the Emergencies Act, and by the 14th, they did it. But I don't know if we talked about this last week, when we saw the evidence of a phone call between Justin Trudeau and Ontario Premier Doug Ford on February 9th, the evening of February 9th, Trudeau said to Ford, who said, I'm going to bring in my Emergencies Act, I'm going to give police more powers. Trudeau said, police don't need more powers, they need to do their job. A few days later, he changed his mind.
Brian, if an election was called today, a new poll, a new survey says it's actually good news for the Conservative Party of Canada and Pierre Poilievre?
Yeah, so an election were held today, it'd be 36% nationally for the Conservatives, 34% for the Liberals. Now, I always caution people, national numbers don't matter. They're interesting, but you have to look at where things are regionally. Because let's say that 36% were being driven by Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives getting 75% in Alberta, 75% in Saskatchewan, et cetera, but they're not winning in Ontario, Quebec, Atlantic Canada. They're not going to form government. You've got to have it spread out across the country and win seats, not just run up the score in one riding or a handful of ridings and not win in the others. The good news for Poilievre and the Conservatives here is that they've got a slight lead in Ontario. They're ahead by, I believe, 2 points. The national numbers mirror the Ontario numbers. So it's still very tight in terms of national numbers, in terms of Ontario. There's definitely a strong possibility that if these results showed up, that it would be the Conservatives forming a minority government. That's very much a possibility. But, a lot of time between now and the next election, campaigns matter. And of course, there's all the talk about whether Justin Trudeau even sticks around, and if he doesn't, who his replacement will be. So many factors to consider between now and then. But I think the poll shows that Poilievre is reaching out to voters in the ways that he needs to. And I think a lot of that is talking about cost of living issues, inflation, being able to buy a house, things that matter to Canadians, instead of focusing in on issues that'll make his base happy but not win over those swing voters.
Are there any rumblings coming out of Ottawa that we could potentially be going to the polls? Maybe not this fall, but how about early spring?
I haven't heard those. And of course, I was talking quite a bit a few months ago about the possibility of us being in an election right about now, actually. I think this week would have been one of the timeframes that the Trudeau Liberals would have looked at if they thought they had an easy win coming out of Pierre Poilievre winning the Conservative leadership. But I'm surprised by a couple of things. One, they didn't go that route. Okay, the economic numbers aren't great. Inflation's still really high. They're going to try and battle it out. But strangely, they haven't tried to define Pierre Poilievre. If I was them, again, we're talking about trying to reach swing voters, people who can be swayed either way. I would have had attack ads ready to go on Pierre Poilievre on everything from Bitcoin, which right now is tanked with that big bankruptcy in the US. I would have attack ads on him about the convoy, because that's not something that a lot of middle of the road voters are enamored with. And so they could be convinced either way. I'd be going at them over all kinds of issues. They haven't done that on anything. And I'm sitting there looking, going, oh, if I could run a war room attack ad against them, why aren't you? So I'm puzzled as to what their strategy is here. I thought they would have come out swinging hard against him. They haven't. He's come out swinging hard against them, and he's getting results in the polls.
Brian, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is in Indonesia for the G20 summit. Now, he's been under some pressure to do something about a CSIS report that China meddled in Canada's elections. Trudeau spoke with Chinese President Xi Jinping at the summit. Now, before we chat about what Trudeau said, what do we know about the allegations?
The allegations are that back in 2019, the Chinese government, using their consulate here in Toronto, ran a campaign of foreign interference, of influence. We can't say for sure that the candidates involved knew what was happening, but according to the report, first broken by Sam Cooper over at Global, so kudos to him for that, getting that report. According to the report, 11 candidates, Liberals and Conservatives, we don't know how many of each, but Liberals and Conservatives were identified by the Chinese government as being on their side or persuadable. A sum of $250,000 was dispersed to some of the money going to these candidates through intermediaries, and also that there were attempts to place staff who would try and direct or deflect the candidate, depending on the issue, towards a position more in line with Beijing. That has to be worrisome. We don't know how many of these candidates were elected, if any. We don't know if any of them are in government, in cabinet. Are they shadow ministers? That seems unlikely given the strong anti-China stance that the Conservatives have taken of late, or strong against President Xi, as opposed to the Chinese people. But these are very concerning. So Trudeau, he's been asked about this multiple times now. So has Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly. None of them have ever said, that report is false. That's fake news. CSIS never said anything. So we have to believe that the reporting is accurate. What we're told now is that on the sidelines of the G20, Trudeau bumped into Xi in the hallway. They had a face-to-face discussion. All we know from a readout, we don't know exactly what was said, but the readout says that they did raise the issue. How forcefully? I don't know. But this is the sort of thing that he should raise. And look, this is not a knock against the Liberal Party, because it's Liberals and Conservatives. This is a nonpartisan issue. This is about the integrity of our elections. I've been disappointed in the Prime Minister's statement so far and his unwillingness to denounce this. I hope that he was strong with President Xi, but we simply don't know.
Brian, the RCMP charged a Chinese national with espionage this week, allegedly stealing secrets while working at Hydro-Quebec. Tell me more.
So this is a gentleman who lived in Candiac, just south of Montreal, and had a job working for several years at Hydro-Quebec. Not sure exactly what secrets were being stolen, but this is the type of espionage that China engages in mostly. It's not trying to steal state secrets. It tries to influence policy with politicians, but it tries to steal industrial secrets. I remember years ago, about 20 odd years ago, I was working at a bureaucratic position in Ottawa, and the building next door was Nortel. And one day the police showed up and were arresting a couple of people for the same reason, sending these secrets back to China, stealing secrets from the tech giant. It wasn't the first time and it wasn't the last time that had happened. And we generally see that more on the industrial side than we do on the political, although there have been, I think it was more with Russia trying to get military secrets. They're stuck in the Cold War. China wants to steal everything else. But, it does show that the RCMP working on this, using this type of information that was in the CSIS report on the election, can get results. And so what I want to see is, I'd like to see the names of the candidates that got the assistance, but I'd also like to see those who perpetrated this plan to either be charged or expelled from the country.
Brian, the Canada Border Services Agency was supposed to turn over documents on who got money from the $54 million ArriveCan app, but they did not. So now what?
Well, now the Commons Committee that demanded it has told them, okay, get back to it. We want this information. CBSA has tried to say they don't know the names of some of the subcontractors, and it'll be hard for them to deliver that. But we know in one example, there was a company that was paid $2 million to develop part of the app. all they did was hire other people to work on it, but they got $2 million. Well, call them up and say, you got the money. Who did you hire and what did they do? We need to know. The government paid the invoices, or they paid the people that paid the invoices. They can get this information. This isn't the first time that bureaucrats working under the Trudeau government have refused to release information. You remember Ian Shugart getting chastised for not releasing information related to the Winnipeg lab. This sort of thing can't be allowed to continue to happen. So there was quite the tongue lashing from committee chair Kelly McCauley, and told to get back to it and bring this information to committee forthwith. If that doesn't happen, then what we might see is the committee recommend that this bureaucrat be called before the full House and then censured, which, again, it happened a couple of years ago, but having it happen twice would be quite shocking.
Political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilley, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Hal.
Medicine Hat is one of the sunniest spots in Canada. The Gas City is a popular destination for families with young children and retirees alike. Business and community in the southeast part of our province is strong and growing. And to talk more about the potential of Medicine Hat, here is Lisa Kowalchuk, the Executive Director of the Medicine Hat Chamber of Commerce. Lisa, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me, Michael.
Yeah, we're happy to have you here. Now, as we have a few months left in 2022, what are some of the wins for businesses in the Hat this year?
I think so many of our communities can probably say the same, just in terms of the resiliency of our businesses and making it through kind of the global pandemic and the different innovations that we saw with our businesses, from different workforce strategies to, so many of our businesses, particularly our restaurants, putting out patios so that they could serve their businesses, and seeing those continue beyond and being able to create spaces and experiences for their patrons and for our community. I think, another win and success within our community is, despite some of the challenges, we still saw a number of business start up during a very difficult time, taking that risk and that challenge and, surviving through and becoming very successful. So it's really neat to see, again, the strength and resiliency of our business community and those connections and the deeper connections, I think, that have been formed and continue to grow within our community. So it's a really strong presence of our entrepreneurs and that entrepreneurial mindset that we have, in particular, I think, across Alberta, and we see it in Southern Alberta in particular, the willingness to take risks, and certainly even those that have expanded their businesses.
Yes. Yeah, it is great to see, especially the collaboration between businesses. I know my friend Ryan, who's a carpenter in Medicine Hat, he built the outdoor staging, as it were, for the Mad Hatter. And of course, the local's always a great spot to spend the summer outside while visiting with friends. So that is great to see. How about some of the challenges for 2022?
Yeah, I think, again, this is probably, reflected in a lot of communities, but it has been increasingly difficult for business because of that accelerating pace of change and constant change that they're having to adapt to. You put in a global pandemic and the economic, fiscal, regulatory environment that they're having to deal with, even in terms of the technological shifts. So obviously that was accelerated in the last 2 years out of necessity. But, a decade ago, smartphones really didn't exist. 3 decades ago, no one really owned a computer when you look back in time, in terms of households. And we have demographic changes that are impacting us, workforce and workplace trends that are becoming redefined with automation and remote work and new forms of work and the gig economy. Technology obviously is accelerating at an exponential pace, and there's more cybersecurity needed and more challenges and big data and AI and blockchain. So, you look at all of those things, and I always say, we're very fortunate that we have different skills, expertise, and resources as a chamber that we can tap into. But, businesses really need to be connected, resilient, and resourceful, because there are so many different things that are impacting their business and constant changes in political trends and just the global economy overall. So I think the only thing certain is change. And as a chamber, we know we need to be responsive and willing to be able to assist our businesses, recognize and adapt to that evolving landscape. And certainly still recognizing the challenges of our business, that they're just trying to run their day-to-day operations. And so trying to keep up with all of that is very difficult. And I think out of all of that, one of the biggest challenges that we've seen, and I think we see it across the board, is certainly the labor force and workforce and the demand for labor. So that is something we've really honed in on.
Now, how about the provincial government? This year, have they taken maybe more of an active role in helping local businesses recover from the pandemic?
Yeah, I think certainly we've seen it across the board in terms of the different incentives that have been provided and different opportunities. So things like the Jobs Now program, or the Canada-Alberta Summer Job Program, in addition to some of the federal response. On a local level, we had a number of incentives that had been introduced as well on a local level, which we didn't see in a lot of other municipalities. And some of those incentives are ongoing or continuing to evolve, because we also recognize that, despite what has happened in the last couple of years, we have economic recovery ahead of us. And so how do we continue to recognize the challenges of the businesses, but ensure that we're continuing to evolve, adapt, innovate to recover and grow and thrive as we move forward.
Right. Now, how about the city council and the new mayor? Like, I was thinking of Jim Turner the late Jim Turner, as you were chatting, and he was such a delightful fellow. City Council is a little bit different. We have a new mayor in Medicine Hat. Can you talk about the relationship, or maybe what they've done for the community, or the business community, I should say?
Yeah, I think we've always had a really good relationship with our city councils, and have always had that open dialogue, which certainly we see benefit, because they joke every once in a while that we're the official opposition, but really we say we're just there to help improve the environment and just make note or make point of the things that we can just do a little bit better. And certainly with a change in council comes that that establishment of a new era and communication, and looking at how we can align strategic plans and priorities moving forward. The City Council recently adopted a new strategic plan. And so within that, we've certainly taken a look and made some points of the areas that we can really hone in on, look to kind of capitalize on. So in terms of innovation, there is a willingness to pursue opportunities and remove obstacles to success and innovation, and looking at development. There is a desire. The second strategy is the economic evolution. So we always like to see when the economy is a priority, and looking at how we encourage a strong and diversified regional economy, as well as encouraging entrepreneurship. There's a goal for service orientation. So as we all know, we need our municipalities to be easy to deal with from a business perspective. They are looking at partnerships and governance, and we hope to play a fairly prominent role in those partnerships in terms of how we can ensure that there is resources for our business community and those connections, and that we're able to provide insight into ways that we can adapt and grow community wellness, resilience, and sustainability. So we have had conversations with council. We actually have a meeting coming up here with our council at the end of the month, and we continually seek out those opportunities where we can kind of reflect and communicate and ensure that we're constantly moving forward. So we did a presentation to City Council. This is a follow-up to that, and we regularly have those meetings to discuss how we move plans forward. So not just talk for the sake of talk, but actually see those action plans.
Right, and that's great. That is one of the things that I've always liked about the Medicine Hat Chamber of Commerce and the Lethbridge Chamber of Commerce as well, is how active a role the Chamber takes in advocating for business and business ideas. One of the things that I like that the Medicine Hat Chamber does is the Brown Bag Series. Can you talk a little bit about how those new businesses, or maybe they're entrenched businesses, but they kind of need a new strategy or something? Can you talk a little bit about the Brown Bag Series?
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up because that was a new initiative that we did start in 2022 and has been going really well. And it was, again, out of a recognized need that businesses don't necessarily have all the tools in their toolkit to succeed and to thrive and to grow. And so we wanted to launch the series as a way to give them some of those additional resources and to provide a bit of training from professionals within our community. So that business to business connection. So if they have questions, they don't have to call somebody outside of our community for that professional advice. These are professionals right within our community that are here to support the businesses. And so it's really walking them through. I always say businesses know their trade. They're really good at what they do, which is typically why they start a business, because they're passionate about that particular industry or trade or skill set that they have. But they haven't necessarily been given the skills to run a business. So you have to deal often with HR and finance and cash flow and dealing with, the different regulatory environments and cybersecurity and websites and communication and social media and all of that. And it gets really overwhelming. So what we really try to do is break that down, simplify it into topical sessions that businesses can attend at no charge.
That's great. Now, I know Medicine Hat has a lot of opportunity, I think, for new and established businesses. Certainly the weather is great, but can you talk a little bit about how the Chamber and Invest Medicine Hat and even like Tracy Stroud and Apex work together to help businesses?
Yeah, I think a really good example is actually the Connector platform. So if you go to the Apex Alberta website, there's actually an online platform that again, an evolution through this global pandemic where you can enter a virtual building and go into different rooms and see some of the different supports. So it is a collaborative environment where all of those business supports are represented, not only in Medicine Hat, but in the region. And so it's this online platform. So it's intended even for businesses. So perhaps they don't have the time or they can't connect during business hours, or they're looking at Medicine Hat as a place to come or to invest. They have this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week service that they can go in and find some of those resources. So that's a good example of the collaboration. Another one that had been done by all the parties, all the business support providers within our region was the Invest Southeast Alberta initiative. And so that really kicked off in about 2019, and it was to look at business retention, expansion, and workforce development. And of course, we had this lovely little global situation occur in a couple of years. And so there has still been a lot of work done as a result of that. Another one of the initiatives that came out of that whole collaboration was the move to Medicine Hat website. So with Tourism Medicine Hat and Community Futures Entrecore, they have developed a beautiful website that talks about, if you want to come to live, work, or play in Medicine Hat and the resources. And then you couple that with resources that we've built on our website. So we have a whole business resource page, but we also developed a business support toolkit that has all of the resources from the different partners included and who you can connect with for business supports.
That's great. Now, we talked a little bit earlier, just briefly, about kind of a labor shortage. Can you tell us a little bit about maybe the new building permits and house sales? How have they been this year in Medicine Hat?
Yeah, so when I was looking at the stats, certainly the building permit values have increased. The annual change, when I looked at statistically, by 53, just about 54%. And then in terms of the number of permits, we're kind of flat in terms of where we've been at. And then in terms of the stats on house sales, I actually had reached out to the Medicine Hat Real Estate Board, and they would be a phenomenal resource to connect specifically on that. But certainly for housing starts, again, we haven't seen huge growth, but still relatively stable, which is always good to see. We certainly don't want to see the declines. We want to see it growing. And I think too, when you look at what has occurred in the last couple of years, that certainly makes sense too. But the housing market, just anecdotally, is still really strong. Houses are not staying on the market all that long.
That's great. I was chatting last night with one of my high school friends who is a real estate sales member, and he was actually telling me that his office gets a lot of calls from Canadians in Manitoba and Ontario about moving to Medicine Hat. Can you share with us a few things that attracts those young families to the area?
Well, I think it's, the quality of life. When you look at the pace of life and the cost of living, I mean, it certainly has been top of mind in terms of affordability across our country. And so I think more and more people are looking at just the cost of living and affordability, and Medicine Hat provides that in terms of the housing market, residential tax rates, an accessible, walkable community. So I think that's very attractive to a lot of people, and they're looking to escape kind of the busyness of the larger centers and looking to mid-sized centers like ours, where you still have all of the amenities and you still have opportunities. But it's not quite this, it's not an hour commute to work. You can get anywhere in the city in, 15 minutes. And so I think that's very attractive. It's a safe community. So, when people are looking at raising a young family, it's certainly a place you want to go, certainly a place that I've invested in personally, and why I call Medicine Hat home.
Yeah, there's so many great neighborhoods too in Medicine Hat. And I have probably another 27 questions I could ask you, but we're out of time, unfortunately. So yeah, thank you very much for joining us today. It was great to hear about Medicine Hat and all the potential for the future.
Well, and if people want to know more, they can come onto our website, medicinehatchamber.com, or give us a call. We always love talking about Medicine Hat. So, and the Southern Alberta region. I think we have a great region here within the province.
So thank you very much for watching. For all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Michael Clausen. God bless and have a great night.